Hello, New Hampshire Realtors. I'm Marc Drapeau, your 2020 NHAR President. It's Monday, September 14th, and we're now 13 weeks into Governor Chris Sununu's Safer at Home order. We've got a few brief news items to report on, and then we'll get to our guest. First off, September is Realtor Safety Month, so check in with NAR for all things safety related, including articles on safety related topics and an upcoming webinar at nar.realtor/safety. The link is below. Next up, mark your calendars for two upcoming dates. On September 23rd at 6 p.m., I'll be live with 2018 Realtor of the Year, Diana Mancuso, to surprise this year's recipient. That will be a Facebook Live event, also to be live streamed from NHAR's website. So please stay tuned for additional details. Again, that's our Realtor of the Year announcement live at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, September 23rd. A week later, on Wednesday, September 30th, we're excited to bring New Hampshire Realtors a free Zoom seminar with world-renowned real estate speaker and trainer David Knox for an hour-long session on negotiations entitled, "Are You a Messenger or a Negotiator?" That session will begin at 9:30 with a partial preview of the NHAR 2021 conference with appearances from our two keynote speakers, Allison Levine and Chris Voss, followed by our one-hour webinar. The session is free, but we ask that anyone who plans to attend register at the link below so that we can provide you with the Zoom link. Again, that's Wednesday, September 30th at 9:30 a.m. This morning, NHAR released the monthly data for August, and despite a continued decline in inventory, we're still seeing record sales numbers. While the unit sales were down slightly from August of 2019, we hit another monthly record for median price at $349,450 statewide. And the total dollar volume was also the highest we've ever seen in any one month. So again, at 2,400 homes for sale, it's the lowest inventory we've seen in at least 15 years and the highest median price in New Hampshire history. Those numbers can be found on the e-news sent this morning and on our homepage of our website at nhar.org. So now let's bring in NHAR legal counsel Matt Johnson to help walk us through our next topic, which is the recent federal moratorium on non-payment related housing evictions. Hello again, Matt.
Hi, glad I could be back.
Glad to have you. On September 4th, the CDC declared a temporary halt to residential evictions to prevent the further spread of COVID-19. So Matt, could you start by just sharing a few of the factual details, and then we'll discuss some of the legal implications.
Absolutely. So the Center for Disease Control is actually the body that issued it. It is a nationwide eviction moratorium for non-payment of rent for residential evictions. It does not apply to commercial evictions. It runs through December 31st, 2020, and it doesn't automatically prevent evictions, but it allows a tenant's sort of this defense, if you will, to an eviction process by filing a declaration meeting certain criteria to allow them to stay in a house. And that would have to say that you're under a certain economic threshold, you have tried to get resources from federal and state governments and assistance for your rent, you're unable to pay the rent or all of the rent because of circumstances. If you were evicted, that you would be substantially likely that you would become homeless, or that you would have to live in a house that was close proximity or very shared tight space, that you really used your best efforts, and that you are supposed to continue to try to make any rental payments that you can during this process. And so what happens is there is a declaration or sworn statement that a tenant can prepare and file, and theoretically file, either give to the landlord or file with the court to stop the eviction proceeding. My understanding that nationally, at least that is happening. Now these statements are under oath, so the statements have to be true and accurate. In New Hampshire, for example, it'd be important to note there are several programs that the state government has put together a fund for tenants. So at a minimum, I would think you should need to pursue those avenues for payment. And one of the things landlords can do is if they have tenants saying, hey, look, I may not be able to pay, sometimes it's just a lack of communication or lack of knowledge of what resources are available. Landlords can help tenants and say, hey, look, have you contacted the state? There is a fund of money. There are programs around to help you be able to stay in your house and be able to pay your rent and keep the economy going. I will say, I don't think it really, you have to have a COVID-related illness or a COVID-related impact for this to qualify. given the broad economic downturn obviously brought about by the COVID pandemic. That's a trigger, but you don't have to have a showing that you've had COVID or someone in your family member has had COVID or you've been laid off because of COVID. And I guess the last important point to remember is it doesn't mean that the rent, or 2 points, it doesn't mean the rent is forgiven. It just means you can't be evicted. And second, it doesn't preclude evictions for other reasons, such as life or safety issues or property damage issues or other disruption. Those are all still available, and this defense would not be available to block those type of evictions.
Thanks, Matt. Obviously, there are some significant fines at stake for landlords who violate this order, but what exactly constitutes a violation? At what point are legal sanctions triggered?
That's a great question. That's really a tricky one to see. I know the sanctions are significant, but in most states, and I can't speak of all of them, but at least in New Hampshire, to properly evict someone, you have to go through the state court process, and you have to file a landlord-tenant writ, and you have to get what's called a writ of possession authorized by the court. So I have a hard time understanding where those fines would hit in New Hampshire, because theoretically the tenant is going to provide this declaration and the judge is either going to agree with it or not agree with it. Once the judge issues a writ of possession, that's a state court order, and if a landlord is following what the judge tells them, I don't see how he or she could be subject to fines. What's unclear is whether someone, if a tenant sent this declaration prior to a landlord-tenant suit being filed and a landlord went ahead with it anyway, maybe. But I guess my takeaway is right now the fines seem far more for show than actual practical effect.
Thanks, Matt. Is there anything else that you want to touch on this particular subject, Matt?
I think the only other thing I would say, like not unlike all of the situation we're in, is stay tuned, because I envision that this order will be challenged in court in a variety of places. And so the ultimate order, it may stay in effect, it may be modified, it may be changed. We don't really know, but currently this is the rule. And so if you're a landlord, be aware that this is out there, and this is a defense for tenants. So all the more reason to communicate with tenants and try to work something out voluntarily, probably better. But this, like all the other rules and processes and procedures for this, is probably going to change over time. So stay tuned.
Thank you. I do want to point out that this issue is at the top of NAR's agenda right now, working with coalition groups to ensure that money is available to tenants and ultimately to landlords to meet their own mortgage obligations and other expenses. As NAR keeps us updated, we'll certainly pass along any and all information to our members. So thank you for joining us as always, Matt, and thanks for the great information.
You're welcome. And one last point I forgot to add, that we will be sending out a link to the CDC approved declaration form that tenants can fill out, just so people can have access to it and see what the requirements are. It walks through it pretty cleanly how tenants can qualify for this defense.
Oh, great point. I'm glad you brought that up. So that's it for this week. Thank you for joining our update. And as always, we ask that you share this with colleagues so that we can keep all of our members up to date with news from NHAR. Everyone, stay safe.